That's right. Toxic Avenger, baby. We're talking about the new one. If you do not know, I did review all the Toxic Avengers movies before this one came out. Honestly, I reviewed them before we even knew this one was, or I even knew this one was a thing. And then, so otherwise I probably would have reviewed them on the main channel, but I didn't end up doing that for that reason. And then the other part that kind of screwed this whole review series up was that, well, the Toxic Avenger movies, or at least this one, got held up for years. Basically, this film was shown at film festivals like 2 years ago or something like that. The studio behind it deemed it unreleasable, which I don't understand because if you don't know what the Toxic Avenger is this movie series that was made by Trauma Entertainment. Trauma Entertainment would basically make movies that were meant to shock and offend. They were hyper violent, lots of nudity, lots of just foul mouth, gross humor, stuff that it was just to make to shock and offend. That was kind of their old brand. Toxic Avenger was that. And so Toxic Avenger was actually the one that kind of built their brand in a lot of ways. And so it's one of those movies that has its own style and vibe to it. And you're either there for it or you're not. And a lot of people were. They had 4 movies and a kid's cartoon, shockingly. But, that's Toxic Avenger. Like I said, you're either here for it or you're not. And I definitely was here for it. So, I don't know. When I finally heard this movie was going to release, I had to go. And I was surprised the theater I went to was actually pretty filled up. What shocks me about this movie is that this movie is insanely over reacted to. And I think that's for a couple reasons about this movie. First of all, people are saying this one's really gross and really violent. Honestly, it's definitely hyper violent, but the gross out parts are nothing compared to those original movies. And so I felt a little bit disappointed on that end. There's a couple scenes that kind of like went, oh shit, that's kind of nasty. But for the most part, I didn't really have that kind of reaction. And and there's also a lot of articles about people walking out because they're not liking this movie. I think part of it is because the Toxic Avenger is such an 80s thing that it hasn't been really around or talked about for a long time. That there's a group of people who are probably watching this movie going, oh look, a new Avengers movie, right? And that's what they think this is. And when they find out that it isn't, there's a little bit of a, oh shit. Sorry, give me one sec. Anyways, so it's kind of an interesting thing when you think about that whole scenario with this movie about people thinking that. Like, I think there probably are people who think that. Which I can't imagine thinking this is an Avengers movie because this is not an Avengers movie. So, getting that out of the way, I guess I really should talk about my thoughts with this movie as a huge fan of the Toxic Avenger. It was good with a lot of flaws to it. Some people are going to complain for flaws for this one that's really low budget, but I don't care. Other Toxic Avenger movies were like that. I definitely noticed it and it looked cheap and kind of at a couple points. But I think, again, that is the Toxic Avenger, so I can't complain about something that's just part of this thing. I think what just bothered me, like I said, is it didn't go far enough with the gross out. It didn't really push that stuff enough. There are a couple points where it got me. For the most part, it just didn't, and it felt like there was such an overreaction to it that I was just like, what? This is what y'all are upset about? the way they're talking about it is the way that I would have felt during terror that I felt watching Terrifier movies, and this is actually being partially released by the same company. So I just think it's all ridiculous. The humor for this movie, though, is is just, some of it was the other disappointing part. Like, there are a lot of jokes being made in this movie, and most of them the audience was silent. There were a few that got the audience laughing at a certain point, but for the most part, I was in a pretty packed theater and we're all pretty dead silent. And and it's kind of one of those movies where you could see the obvious joke being made, but it's just not that funny. So we're all just sitting there like, but the moments that got big reactions was the violence and stuff, which is pretty cool. So I don't know. And Peter Dinklage was a fun, unique twist on the character. Kind of had his own reasons for that. I kind of wonder if they were afraid to do the gross out stuff and really push it as far as they could, which I understand, because it is 2025 and not the 80s anymore. But then my advice to you is don't make a Toxic Avenger movie. But the other thing that I will say is, like, if you're not going to do that, then go further with the commentary in this movie, because there is some commentary in the movie about evil CEOs. I forget what they call the evil CEO in this movie, but they call him a pretty shitty name, which is like them pretty much telling you what this movie's villain is and what his deal is. There's all kinds of corrupt political themes in here. There's people in a restaurant holding people at gunpoint because they're mad that the name of a restaurant changed. The far right totally does this. Maybe that extreme recently, but I swear that's happened in real life at some point. I don't know, it's all crazy stuff, but I feel like, wow, okay, there's political themes in here, and they're actually pretty fun commentaries, and I feel like, but they didn't really explore that enough. There's themes about medical debt and what that does to you, and I mean, Peter Dinklage's character as Toxie, part of the reason he gets mutated is he's dealing with medical debt. In fact, that's why they're actually donating to medical debt when you buy tickets for this movie and stuff. So it's pretty cool. I don't know. I like this movie. I thought it had a lot to offer. Check this movie out. Let me know your thoughts. Like, share, and subscribe.